What's up, everyone? Tara Roberts here with Win Daily, and we're talking NFL player props for Underdog for week 12. And I've got another 10 props for you this week. Before I dive in, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, check out the description below for a link to sign up to play on Underdog. 100% deposit match up to $500. Now let's go ahead and dive in and talk props. This week is kind of a weird week. Usually I like honing in on one or two games for multiple picks and then making several one-offs. But the matchups this week are kind of weird, kind of strange, and injuries are making this just a very odd week. So we've got a lot of individual ones here. We will start off with Lamar Jackson. With no Mark Andrews, I am looking at Lamar Jackson all by himself. It's difficult to correlate here with Lamar Jackson because Zay Flowers' prop is kind of high given his past performances. I get that this is an excellent matchup, but I feel like you're asking a lot of me to get there with Zay. Isaiah likely doesn't have a yardage prop, and neither does Odell Beckham Jr., so it's really just tough to kind of pair here. When I'm looking at Lamar, I want to take a similar approach that I took with Justin Fields last week. If I like a strong rushing quarterback in a very good matchup, but I'm not 100% sold on his passing prop, I take pass plus rushing yards. Lamar's passing prop is fine, but I can see a reality in which he has an excellent game against the Chargers, but doesn't actually have a ton of yardage attached to it. But because I'm confident that this game will run through Lamar, I like the over on his pass plus rushing yards at 281.5. Moving on to another prop, Chicago versus Minnesota is a very intriguing matchup that might end up being a defensive struggle because both defenses have been really solid lately. But there is one particular prop that I like to pick on when it comes to Chicago: receiving yards for running backs against them. It hits week after week after week, so we'll keep going back. And this week it is Ty Chandler over 9.5 receiving yards. That's just one catch. Come on, we got this. Moving on to the next prop. I love this prop. It is risky because we just saw Devon Achane come off of IR and immediately get injured. Kyren Williams' last game was in week 6. That is a long layoff, but it is important to note that the Rams immediately released Darrell Henderson. Perhaps a sign of confidence around Williams' recovery. The Rams will likely be cautious with Williams, but cautious should be kind of put in perspective here. Prior to the injury, Williams' workload was insane. I am talking 100% of snaps, 95% of snaps, just very kind of unreasonable to maintain. There's a lot of room to bring that down and for him to still be very effective. He can stand to be taken off the field and used more efficiently. But what I really like is that even if he is limited here, this is an excellent matchup. I like the over at just 56.5 on Kyren Williams rushing yards. Moving on to the next two props are coming from one particular team. For the Bills versus Philadelphia, I like a couple of props for the Bills. I did also like Devonta Smith receiving yards. This was going to be one of those games for me where I pick multiple props, but he popped up on the injury report last minute. He's expected to play, but it just made me very wary of anything around him or A.J. Brown as well. But on the Bills side, Josh Allen's passing prop, it's okay, but it's a little aggressive in my opinion. But the receivers, their props for Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, yeah, give me those. They're down after two subpar games from both receivers. I like the over on Diggs at 74.5 receiving yards and Gabe Davis at 36.5 receiving yards. That's a very reasonable ask from Diggs in a very pass-friendly matchup, and that is essentially 2 receptions for Davis. Just 2. That's all we need. Moving on to a next game, I like 2 props from the Kansas City-Vegas game. Jerick McKinnon is out, and while McKinnon doesn't really get a ton of work on the ground, this is an excellent matchup, and I would expect Isaiah Pacheco to be on the field for potentially upwards of 70% of snaps here. I want the over on his rushing yards at 67.5. On the opposite end, this matchup is Aiden O'Connell's worst nightmare. Kansas City's defense is, I don't even know how to describe it. You just don't want to attack it. 201.5 passing yards might seem reasonable for him, but I just don't think it's happening. The Chiefs' last 3 matchups were against Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, Russell Wilson. All hell below 200 passing yards. We are taking the under here. Now we'll close things out with a few individual props. Jerome Ford over 49.5 rushing yards. I applaud the turnaround that Denver has made. Their defense is for real. But one area that they just can't really seem to get right is stopping the run. That is the one flaw of this Denver defense. Over 150 yards to the Minnesota backs. Over 150 yards to the Buffalo backs. I expect both Ford and Hunt to do well on the ground. Hunt does not have a rushing yards attached to him, so it is Ford over 49.5 rushing yards. And one more for the over here. Ramondre Stevenson over 82.5 rush plus receiving yards. The Giants have been very generous on the ground. It is the gift that keeps on giving. But because the Patriots aren't exactly trustworthy to give Ramondre volume, rushing plus receiving covers our bases here. And that is what we need in a good matchup for the Patriots. I would pick more props from this game, but there aren't really any since we don't actually know who the starting quarterback is. Just keep that in mind. And we'll close things out with an under here, and I feel kind of bad about it. Dameon Pierce is returning, and the Houston backfield should be split again in what is a terrible matchup against a tough Jags run defense. I would love for Singletary to continue his hot streak, but the Jags just held Derrick Henry to 38 rushing yards last week. The entire Pittsburgh backfield to 32 rushing yards. The combination of Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor to 40 rushing yards. And James Cook individually, previously, to -4 yards. You got to take the under on Singletary's rushing yards at 45.5. And that wraps things up. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, remember to sign up to play on Underdog today. The link is below in the description. 100% deposit match up to $500.